Greetings and welcome to another edition of the Red Pill Diaries. I'm your host, Rasheed. I know that my picture went up when the show started. I know that I did that purposely. Give me 1 second, everybody, okay? Let's see. I'm talking to Matthew right now. That's what's going on right now. Let's see. Let's see. All right. He said give him 5 minutes. He'll be live, but it's 5 minutes, okay? Everybody, welcome to another edition of the most powerful platform for truth, bar none, anywhere on God's green earth. This is your platform for empowerment, enlightenment, and education. This is the Red Pill Diaries, and I'm your host, Rasheed. I know you hear my voice straining. It's like I haven't gotten a lot of sleep, but I'm here still. I want to thank each and every one of you for joining me, for giving me your time, and those of you who will join us later. Matthew said, "Give him 5 minutes, and he'll be with us." He pulled an all-nighter last night, and I know exactly what that is. And you barely get any sleep. You close your eyes, and as soon as you close your eyes, you have to jump up. You're like, "Oh my God, I have to do this," and I'm constantly like that. My mom and my wife and my sister, they're constantly chewing me out about that. But I just wanted to talk to you for a few minutes. Let me tell you something. These people are so vindictive. We're going to talk about a lot of issues, but before Matthew joins us, we're going to talk about me putting a post up in our community section. Okay, everybody, just bear with me. For those of you who are joining me on Twitter, Twitch, Facebook, not Facebook, the Red Pill Journals, the Red Pill Diaries, the Red Pill Diaries on Rumble, the Red Pill Diaries on Odyssey, and if they're not knocking down the one on Locals, then Locals also. For those of you who have been keeping yourself on top of what's going on with the platform, with the show, you know we've been really protesting how YouTube has been doing us. We're going to get into all of the news that's going on, specifically and especially about what we see coming down the pipeline with war in the Middle East, North African region, the Asia Pacific, and Europe. But I want to just tell you all this. I want to inform you this, and I have the goods to prove it. So we put up our frustrations in the community section yesterday, and people have liked and some have responded to that. Earlier today, we got a notification from YouTube that one of our videos was suspended. Not was suspended, was removed, and we've gotten a strike. And guess what it is? It's a video done with former U.S. Army psychological warfare officer Scott Bennett. This is the third or fourth time that they've done that with one of the interviews that I've done with Scott Bennett. They don't explain to me what policy that it violates. They only tell me that it violates a policy. Now, here's the thing. The video that was removed was done over a year plus, I believe a year and a half ago, if I'm not mistaken. So conveniently, I got this thing last night, get a strike, get a video removed after protesting them taking my subscribers, taking me out of the search engine, suppressing my numbers and view counts, and messing with my dashboard. What are the odds? As a matter of fact, for those of you who may be wanting to see it, let's see. Give me 1 second. I like to prove what I'm saying, and then we'll go into what the rest of the stuff. Give me 1 second. Here we are, right here. Oh, this says misinformation. Now check this out. It says we wanted to let you know our team reviewed your content. Now this is a year and some ago, but this is last night. And we think it violates. We think, they don't prove it. They have nothing to substantiate it. They're just going on thoughts. And we think it violates our medical misinformation policy. Medical misinformation policy? What the heck? We know you may not have realized this was a violation of our policies. Oh, man. And then it says, however, we remove the following content from YouTube. And it says, on the precipice of war. That's the name. This is the title of the video. So what we're going to do, we're going to put that on Patreon. And we may just put it up there for free for anybody that want to watch it. The name of the video is called On the Precipice of War, featuring former U.S. Army Psychological Warfare Officer Scott Bennett. And it says, time it occurred, you can see an example around 29 minutes and 57 seconds in your video. While this is one example, there may be many other instances. I mean, this is crazy. This is a former psychological warfare officer. He was over the U.S. psychological warfare program. He's telling you about things, and they're telling him or telling me, for me interviewing him, that this was medical misinformation. Now, YouTube had nothing to do with the psychological warfare, I suppose, quote unquote, program. And they're trying to tell him or tell me that this guy is representing medical misinformation and violating YouTube policy. Make that make sense. It's crazy. It's right here. You might not be able to see it because of the blur, but I just want to put this up. You'll know the YouTube tag right there. You can see the red thing. That's YouTube. They've done that to me. After complaining about them stripping me of dozens upon dozens upon dozens upon dozens of subscribers this week, after suppressing my view count and my number counts, because my when I'm live, it'll show me 100, 200, and then for you, it'll show you 40 or 50 people. And then after the live goes off, it'll say 3 views and 27 likes. And then 3,970 subscribers. I go back, it's 3,950 subscribers. And then I go back, I get another 10. I'm back where I start, almost where I started from. When I look again, I'm down another 8 or 9. This is an everyday thing. We have it documented with pictures and everything. But this is the price that you have to pay when you go against the machine. This is what I'm telling you. I want you to think about this. As we talk about the coming wars and the positioning of nations with their military for confrontation. America and the West, they have exhausted their time of rulership. Whenever you get offended when somebody has an opposing point of view and you can't defend yourself against that opposing point of view, right? You censor that opposing point of view. You try to suppress that opposing point of view. What is different about that than the communist Soviet Union? I'm asking. America always talking about she's the home of the free, and we have freedom of expression and freedom of the press, and this is a democratic land, and the Western world says that often, right? They often promote gender diversity, right? I want you to see how hypocritical these people are. Gender diversity. You no longer have to be a man. You no longer have to identify yourself as a man or woman. You can be a he, she, thee, she, or we, she. You can identify yourself as a dog, a horse, or whatever. They will allow that, and then they will condemn you if you don't go along with that. They promote diversity of that, but they suppress diversity of thought and opinion. Make that make sense. I want you to make that make sense. Because it's absolutely insane for the person with common sense who's looking on from a rational view, looking at the things that are now taking place in the Western world. And they don't realize that doing this is only speeding up their demise. I see Matthew is in the booth. As soon as his picture comes, I got to bring him in right now. I got to bring my guy in right now. Matt, how is it going?
Hey, Rasheed, I'm doing all right. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties on my side, but it all seems to have worked out. I'm just trying to fix my phone here.
All right.
Can you hear my voice pretty well?
Yes, yes. I hear you very good. I will hear you very well.
Oh, good. All right, cool.
Matt, what is going on? Isn't this a symptom of Western decline when they can promote diversity of like gender? You no longer have to identify yourself as a man. You no longer have to identify yourself as a woman. You can identify yourself as a frog, a cat, a dog, or whatever. And but yet they suppress diversity of thought and opinion.
Well, that's that's such a great. I love your questions, Rasheed. They're so simple, but they're deep. Yeah, no, I was thinking about this the other day. That it's interesting that in a society which cherishes individual, it seems like it's a perversion of the whole Enlightenment individualism gone amok. So there's this idea that the Enlightenment emerged organically out of the Renaissance, and a lot of these popular beliefs that just organically happened are completely naive and devoid of any considerations of the political agendas of an oligarchy that is trying to manipulate and social engineer society towards feudalism. Like they just completely ignore that. So there's these models that explain how the evolution of thought occurs that animates our cultures in time, and so people can say, oh, well, the reason why we don't have Mozarts or Da Vinci's today is because they were the product of the Baroque period or the Renaissance age, and the age created the man. And that's a sleight of hand. That's actually a lie, as far as I could see it. It's like the culture is something that's true, shapes all of us. But at the same time, if we're truly sovereign individuals, we can in turn shape the culture. Like we have ideas independent that are outside of the material confines of the norms of our society, which is why when society becomes crazy or becomes evil as norm, like when normal becomes evil and stupid, we don't have to be evil and stupid. We have this thing we were born with of a conscience, of a power of mind, of thinking for ourselves if we choose to use it. Now, it's true that the majority don't. So unfortunately, a lot of people have tended to fall into the mold, giving more fuel to that explanation. But there's an oligarchy that has been working to, as far as my research is taking me down this path, to promote sets of ideas that cut us off from our true selves, and that promote things like empiricism. The idea that truth is the consequence of our senses, just by accumulating data that we can measure and charting that data onto graphs. We can look for patterns that we can then extrapolate into laws, and that's how we're told laws happen, like laws are discovered. And that's just not true. When you actually read the writings of any great scientist who made a discovery, they don't do that. Like, they use their senses obviously to get data, but the discovery of the principle that causes the patterns to be what they are is not located within the data. It's located in a power of hypothesis formation, an ability to shape a concept that is beyond the sum total of the data. So that's like a healthy mind, and you could see it in the arts. You can see with Bach's Well-Tempered Clavier and his innovations in discovering new rules of like laws, universal laws of melody that allow for people to have greater freedom to express beauty. You could see it in the discoveries of art and perspective and chiaroscuro, right? That Da Vinci and so many others, Rembrandt, are working on. There's like real objective laws, but that when they're acted upon, the artist has a greater ability through that knowledge and obedience to said knowledge to express greater forms of natural truth and goodness. Or inversely, also, if you're not a good person and you're a more deceitful person, you can use that knowledge to make people more seduced to their senses. You could use it kind of like to corrupt people too, right? Because beauty is an attractive thing. It doesn't mean it's necessarily good. Beauty can also be a way to get you into the brothel. So, you can see how there's a higher domain of battle, of fight, that most people are just not used to considering when they're thinking about, why is my society stupid? And I think, with our Enlightenment, age of John Locke and Newton and Thomas Malthus and John Stuart Mill, we had all of these British empiricists promoted heavily by those who control the printing presses, by those who had the influence, right, over the global propaganda, over the British Empire was the top dog for centuries. And so they of course wanted certain ideas like what their chosen initiated intellectuals would produce as propaganda for their victims, including their own people in some ways, like in the plebes of Britain itself, to have this idea that no, there is no God, there's no idea of morality objectively. These are all constructs that are just created because you can't see God, you can't see morality, you can't see justice, you can't weigh it, measure it. So they're all just metaphysical abstractions that don't really have existence. We could choose to, live our lives according to these abstractions if it makes us happy. Maybe it'll make like some social stability, says Kant. So we'll do it. We should do it. We should just be good. But they're not. But we don't really, the goodness doesn't have meaning beyond the fact that it just kind of is a useful utilitarian thing that helps, that we all just agree to as a social contract, and it just keeps things together. And it's like, well, wait a minute. That is not necessarily proven. That's like, you're just saying that because you can't see morality, like the principles of justice or freedom or dignity. You can't see it with your senses. Doesn't mean it's not intrinsically accessible and true if you're using something more than your senses. So I think that when those things became too normalized and started shaping too much of our society, we began to worship increasingly. We needed something to fill the void of that lack of God, that lack of reasonable faith in something beyond. And it became increasingly based upon, consumerism, what I can do for myself. And that sort of thing really, I think, contaminated a lot of the so-called elite classes, right? People who were born in with a little bit of wealth. And then you had this idea of everybody pursuing, like, everybody has an existential crisis all of a sudden, because there's nothing that awakens our true selves when society is going off the rails. And then as a consequence, it seems like we without that higher sense, we're all looking for something to fill that, like whether it's my unique style of clothing, whether it's the tattoos I get that make me feel like an individual that isn't just, part of some ant colony. So everybody just races in, especially, and it got so bad in the consumer age, to find their what makes them unique without developing their quality of mind. So their minds became blubber, and they look maybe different, but actually their values are all homogenized in this LGBTQ world of hedonism, and they can't think, and then they fall prey to supporting garbage propaganda that says we should overthrow a government because they're not respecting the LGBTQ value structure of some minority group in the Middle East or something. Says this human rights lawyer supported by George Soros. That's my lame way of kind of thinking about that question, but it's definitely a pretty profound question.
Matt, I asked that question because we're watching the Western world implode, and the leadership think by dumbing down the population that allows them to rule longer. But in reality, it is helping to bring the entire system down in the West through the dumbing down of the population, because without proper education, you have no way of advancing in the future, because you have to have proper education, because that's what civilizes you. That's what doctors, lawyers, the future scientists and everything. But the West sees it as a hindrance to their power structure. And don't you think that this is like a nuclear bomb to the very base of Western society? And they do this because I believe a lot of them are deviants themselves.
Yeah, I do think we're on the verge of a real possible collapse into a prolonged dark age because of what we allowed to happen to ourselves over the past several generations, especially. And what you're saying is totally right. Like, people don't realize that the stability that they've been enjoying for most of their lives when they were in this Western world largely comes from the sacrifices and the excellence that was achieved way before most people here were born. And there was, you look back in the 1950s and even in the 60s, there was more of there were obviously problems. America was being transformed into an empire, but it still had a lot of viability. There was still a cultural practice of giving people political employments as administrators based upon their real life experience. If you're going to administrate over like engineering policies, then it's expected that you and your team will have engineering experience in the real world. Same thing if you were, somebody who was going to be working in the policy sector around medicine, medical considerations. There was an expectation that you're dealing with a doctor. Same thing within the hospital administration systems. There would be people who had real world doctors, nursing experience, who would be then given positions of influence to, shape the distribution and the activity of these systems in the real world. And that's gone. So now you get people who are just, students of management, business management, who are then given positions to administer over the doctors, over the engineering. Our engineering schools suck because we stopped building big projects back in the late 60s, early 70s. We stopped building things. That's why our infrastructure is rotten for the most part. So, of course, our schools accommodate the type of economic values that are in society. So that the schools became transformed under new math, under the Frankfurt School, focusing on extending or in the 60s and the 70s. That's what people like Sir Alexander King were in charge of at the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. This is a guy would go on to found the Club of Rome, which would be sort of a high priesthood to revive the Malthusian revival in the late 60s after Robert F. Kennedy was murdered. And you had people like David Rockefeller, Maurice Strong, many other very, very vicious oligarchs, or at least managers of oligarchs, who were all appointed priests of this new way of organizing society around computer modeling, which is what the Club of Rome brought online. And they were brought into the World Economic Forum, set up by one of Kissinger's stooges, one of his students, Klaus Schwab. And it was being bankrolled by people like Prince Bernhard, a former SS Nazi, who was just, like many Nazis, given new employment after World War II, working not just to manage most of NATO, but also parallel military states around the world, in South America, in Vietnam, working with French fascists from Vichy, that got posh new jobs with Alan Dulles. So that was done. But back on the education, I mean, it's like our education was not unaffected by that. When things like new math, when things like the Frankfurt School ideologues became the foundation of a new reform in education back and it really got bad in the late 60s, early 70s. But it only got worse every single year since then. The idea became, okay, let's extend the definition of what science and engineering is away from the practical getting things done, which is what it formerly was for centuries, like make discoveries, apply them to make life better. Let's get rid of that definition, and let's now expand it to the social sciences, feelings, psychology. We'll have like Freudians now as a branch of the sciences. We'll have the Carl Jungian, like the Jungian school. We'll have the group therapy schools of Max Weber. And the sociologists, and we'll bring in Horkheimer and Adorno, and we'll bring in them as well into the package that will then focus on the science of feelings and the neuropsychology of how you adapt as a student to a group dynamic, and then we'll apply it as well. And they were applying it also to, corporate sectors, business management. People would get into group therapy and talk about their feelings, and people would be all of a sudden chastised for being like a lone wolf. People who were like thinking for themselves would find themselves getting chastised, not getting promoted, getting iced out, not getting their security clearance if you weren't a team player, if you weren't that part of the white collar revolution. So it had a devastating effect culturally and morally on everybody. So yeah, we're now coming to a place where our whole education system's crap. We only started producing people who could accommodate the services sector because we weren't building things. So now you just need people who could work in design, computer design and video game and CGI, whatever. But only jobs that would accommodate the type of consumer economy that's not going anywhere, because we didn't need to go anywhere. All of a sudden we were told, because we achieved utopia. We became a first world industrial country. So we achieved our maximum limit to growth. We don't need to grow anymore. And the idea was, well, let's export our industry to poor countries, and we'll make money that way by, buying low, selling dear. And that type of insanity of the 70s became globalization. It became the deregulation of the banks and the industry, and that caused the mergers and acquisitions that gave these Bilderberger connected corporate leaders power to just like become more powerful than whole nation states, integrating with intelligence. There were, integrating with the military that was typically at the service of a lot of these cartels. And we created this monster that we didn't want to look at because we're too stupid to look with our minds. We didn't know what our minds were anymore because we were believing that our minds were just our senses, and we became useless. So now we have a little window of opportunity to make some serious adjustments based on the screw ups that we allowed to happen. But yeah, that window's closing.
Well, what I'm going to do is a little echo. So what I'm going to do as you're talking, I'm going to mute myself, and then when I ask you a question, I'll mute you, and I'll unmute you. So I want to ask you this question. So the world saw Israel violate a plethora of international agreements, and what essentially they did was committed open and blatant act of war on Iran by bombing the Iranian consulate in Damascus, Syria. Now, we have yet to hear the West condemn the bombing of the consulate, but we continue to hear the Western media, Western leaders condemn Iran for its retaliatory strike for the act of war by Israel on Iran. And now the US and the UK are saying that they will impose new sanctions on Iran for acting in concert with international law against the international law breaker. How isn't that bizarro world?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it's not surprising, is it? At this point in the game, this level of hypocrisy and it's gross, it's insane, and it's expected. Yeah, I mean, it goes deep. Yeah. I was just watching this new episode of Brian Burlitek. You ever talk to Brian Burlitek? Actually, he's really good. No, you're on mute.
I haven't talked to him. I'm hoping to get him on the platform soon. But yeah, he's really good, especially when he breaks down the little things that he reads, all of the stuff that the United States posts on his own website.
Yeah, it's weird. Right? It's like he's filling a niche that you're like, it shouldn't be a niche. Like anybody should have the instinct to just go and like read the policy papers that the U.S. government says it's going to do, and it's just that we're so not used to doing that. So it's nice that he's he's teaching us how to do that so nicely, and I appreciate that. So I do follow him, and I like his little analysis. And he was making the point in a new episode, going through the Brookings Institute paper from 2009, and the name was "Which Path to Persia: Options for a New America Strategy in the Towards Iran." That was it. And it was a document that was made public as a policy paper, feeding into Atlantic Council and NATO think tanks. It was tied to the Brookings Institute's been around for a long time. It's sort of like I think a sort of sister group for the Council on Foreign Relations. So it's very, very important to look at what they do because it does feed directly into policy. And Strobe Talbot and Susan Rice and Jake Sullivan were all passed through the Brookings Institute. So anyway, it lays out in 2009 exactly different scenarios for carrying out the war in Iran that's been it's been causing neocons to froth at the mouth like mad dogs since the 90s, right? And the moment they were able to eliminate Yitzhak Rabin because he was coming a little bit too close to actually achieving something workable in the Middle East as far as achieving a durable form of peace process with Yasser Arafat, he had to be eliminated. And then immediately you had the Project for New American Century. They produced their clean break doctrine, a strategy for securing the realm for Bibi Netanyahu. And that was like the end of 1996 that they published that. And, that's the famous document that basically calls for helping helping Israel not just secure the realm, but to initiate with their, neocon supporters regime change all around them. And they list like 7 nations in that document that culminates with Iran as the maximum goal trophy. But they call for the overthrow of Saddam Hussein, of Bashar, of Syria, of Libya. They go through the list and they do it in the real world. And the idea is greater Israel, like just basically create a situation of ungovernability all around you, Israel, and then you can take advantage of that by growing your borders. And effectively, when you know the history of some of these ideologues among that grouping, they believe in an eschatology that presumes that Israel should grow in size by a factor of like 800%, taking most like all of Iraq, most of Syria, a big chunk of Egypt, about a third of Saudi Arabia. All of that should be, forget Jordan, all of that should become like Israel purged of the Arabs. So you need an excuse to do that. Hence the growth of ISIS. We've all heard around 2007 when Hamas, not ISIS, sorry, of Hamas. We heard that was a bad psychological connection. And see, the media works on me too. But we had it understood that Benjamin Netanyahu has been supporting the growth of ISIS. Well, actually, it's true of ISIS as well. It wasn't really a Freudian mistake. It was true. ISIS never attacks Israel. We found that the Zionists and the Anglo-American intelligence apparatus has been behind the growth of Al-Qaeda, the use of terrorism as a way to disrupt nations that are doing things you don't like, whether it's in Iraq or whether it's in Mali, whether it's in Syria. But they rarely ever seem to attack, if ever, Israel. So they're also kind of attack dogs. And we had the Israeli somebody who was in charge of Israeli defense in 2007 described to the U.S. ambassador how good it is that Hamas also, which grew out of the Muslim Brotherhood in the first Intifada, how good it is that they became the elected representatives of the people of Palestine, because they essentially, the Israelis did need or did desire something a little bit more religiously oriented and a little bit less negotiable, representing the people of Gaza, in order to justify their violent encroachments onto those people living in the Gaza, as an idea of, okay, look, we've got something that we can't negotiate here. We could negotiate with the Arafat. Arafat was smart, much smarter than most people realize. He despised Hamas. He called it out as an Israeli-backed operation trying to disrupt any type of sane dialogue amongst adults that was otherwise happening, like I was mentioning with Yitzhak Rabin, or Yossi Beilin, the justice minister of Israel. And he had to die. So, and there were tests on his body that was exhumed and it found to be poisoned by polonium. So he was actually murdered as well. And I think it was 2003 or something. So, we have this Muslim Brotherhood outgrowth run by not so clear, right? You have these billionaires, these Bedouin billionaires who are living in Qatar, who seem to have exerted an enormous amount of influence over the thing that Hamas was, like Ismail Haniyeh and Khaled Mashal and Musa Mohammed and Maz Hamiyeh. And some of them might have been taken down since October 7th, but there's still like a lot of weird creatures who are bizarre in Qatar, who are the official managers of the political aspect of Hamas, and they interface with the Muslim Brotherhood, the same thing that was working on behalf of the Americans to overthrow Mubarak. Yeah, Mubarak, and install Morsi. So the Muslim Brotherhood, if people want to understand the deep state of the Middle East, you can't understand the deep state of the Middle East without understanding the Muslim Brotherhood, which itself was created through a British MI6 Freemasonic operation back in the the first variation of it was really created in the 20s, again by a British Masonic operation, and then it was sort of revamped in 51 when they were creating Mossad. But I mean, this thing interfaces with a lot of these same unreconstructed Nazis. Like, you know, if we look at a lot of those figures who were brought into Syria, training paramilitary groups in Syria, in Egypt as well, training, or even training the Savak under the Shah.
Yeah.
These were a lot of hardcore unreconstructed Nazis given new deployments. You know, they didn't just go to South America. they were all over the Middle East. Many of them were even working for the Mossad. And there's whole books that have been written about the networks of high level Nazis. You know, Klaus Barbie, and I mean there's a big list that ended up providing intelligence, providing training for all of these different groupings within the paramilitary intelligence states across Latin America, across the Middle East and North Africa. And there's still the consequence of what they of what was done then is still being felt in a bad way today. And this is what El-Sisi has been trying to deal with, is a still existent, very powerful deep state run by the Muslim Brotherhood that still provides that interfaces with branches in other states across the Middle East. And I think that there was some collusion, it seems, between this particular faction of these Bedouins. You know, there's over 2,000 Bedouins that work for the Israeli Defense Forces as special forces. There's weird groups that get into the occult as well that also are very high up in there, that seem to be interfacing with their counterparties within Israel, who are happy to kill their own Israeli people for their esoteric political agendas, and work with their counterparts in Egypt, in Qatar, that are willing to kill their own Muslim people as fodder for their own weird eschatology too. That involves some idea of the Mahdi conflict, you know, causing the earth to burn in order for the Mahdi to arrive, or the Messiah to come back, and to rebuild Solomon's temple, and tied to all of these weird Templar things that, you know, were big in the Crusades. If you're looking like, well, what made the Crusades possible? All of these factors were at play in the centuries of bloodletting that was unleashed, funded by the bankers of Venice and of Amalfi. You know, these big city states that were the next generation of the Roman Empire, and the leading patricians that sort of migrated from the Western Roman Empire into some of these like Italian city states and reconstituted themselves, organizing new cults. The Templars being one of many that were created to rebuild Solomon's temple, you know, usher in or prepare the groundwork for the end times, all this stuff. But it becomes a very Pygmalion effect, because it's like you're talking about all of these like prophecies from some oracle that was given to you, that you're acting upon, but then you're not waiting for the prophecy to happen to see if the oracle was right or whatever. You're then going and doing it. So it's like kind of cheating in that sense. So yeah, there's a lot of this stuff going on right now.
I want to let me mute this one second. Mm-hmm. I want to play a clip I played on the show recently, and the clip is an old clip from C-SPAN. And I just want, because I got a couple of clips, but I want to play this one first for you, and I want to get your take on it, okay? It's only 56 seconds, so pay close attention to this.
Against the state of Israel, political plots, and others.
You tell the story about how you tried to find out what they call the Mossad when they deal with publicly?
I thought it was a reasonable question, but the trouble is you can't pick up the phone book. There's no Langley in Israel that you can look up, you know, CIA, or in our case the Mossad. We thought we should ask, what shall we call it in English? You can translate the Hebrew words, as I said, Mossad is institute, but when they write a letter to their friends in the CIA or the British intelligence, what do they call themselves? It took a while. It was a matter of asking the Prime Minister's spokesman. The best you could do, because officially the Mossad is under the Prime Minister's office. And I think he sort of wondered why you want to know and all that, so we explained. And he came up with the Israeli Secret Intelligence Service. I mean, if it were to have initials, it would be ISIS. Just simple words like that. Interestingly enough, kind of a British model.
I saw you laughing. I saw you laughing, Matt. It's your response. Go ahead, take the floor.
Oh, dude. That's hilarious. Yeah, I'd actually I'd seen that a while ago. I forgot about that clip. Yeah, that's hilarious. Based on everything that's been said, that just is the icing on the cake, eh? No, I mean, I don't know if that's a coincidence. There's always, when you're dealing with this type of thing of like, why is something in the political realm given a certain name, often, or a certain acronym? There's never really, from the top down perspective, there's rarely simply one reason. There's usually like an ambiguity baked into a lot of these acronyms that I think is a bit of a sick joke, from the top down standpoint, at least. It's like I was thinking about, I'm doing a lot of work right now on synthetic cults, and that's part of just my research. And so, like looking into some of the UFO cults like Scientology and L. Ron Hubbard, everyone has an idea that L. Ron Hubbard inside of Scientology established these like 7 rites of initiation. That's pretty well known. They're called like operating thetan, OT, OT1, OT2, all the way on. Now, L. Ron Hubbard was also a student of Aleister Crowley. He was actually a disciple of Crowley and ran the California branch of the OT, the Ordo Templi Orientis. Ordo Templi Orientis, by the way, has a direct connection to the Solomon's Temple operation of the Temple of the Orient, which is a whole other thing. But so Aleister Crowley, within the Ordo Templi Orientis, also had because he was in charge of it. He was given that in like 1912 charge over the British branches, and then he set up all these American branches, and then they sub-branched out, and that's what they do. But OT had 7 rites of initiation as well, based upon the Eleusinian mysteries. So I mean, for low level people who just get sucked into this like Scientology cults, they're like, oh yeah, operating thetan, I'm just trying to like purge my body of like foreign alien entities that are causing me all of my bad feelings, and I have to just like purge and go through these different exercises in order to become like self-actualized and like authentic, not authentic, basically a human god, which is really the point of all of these types of sects, is to basically get people to realize that you are personally God. There is no morality. All of these beliefs in family and your conscience, these are all just constructs imposed on you by ignorant, weak people, or an evil god, a demiurgos from the Bible that just imposed all of these things. So you want to be liberated, right? And so you want to become God, and that's the big Kabbalistic discovery of the whole thing. But then I think that Crowley's disciple L. Ron Hubbard, who also saw himself as the Antichrist, and he writes that in a few places, and his own son talks about that. I think he actually did like a little play on words. Is it Ordo Templi, or is it operating thetan? From the bottom up standpoint, you can't answer it. From the top down standpoint, yeah, I think it's a bit of both, but it's mostly so yeah, we're the creative writers managing this shit show New World Order script, kind of taking a bit of a chuckle when they were choosing that particular name. Does it have anything to do, perhaps, also on a certain level, when the role of these ancient mystery cults and their direct continuity into the current age? Does it have anything also perhaps to do with the cult of Isis, which was a major competing cult to Christianity, which interfaced very closely with the Gnostic cults that went underground but continued to exist? Yeah, probably. There might be many. There might be several meanings to the choice of an acronym like ISIS, but I mean, ISIS themselves, as you pointed out, we were just talking. They were the natural outgrowth of Al Qaeda that was created by the U.S. military, or the CIA, doing Operation Cyclone in the first place in order to radicalize a bunch of young, disenchanted men with no economic hope for the future in the Middle East, as part of the gambit to weaken Russia. And Zbigniew Brzezinski spearheaded that one. Later on, Barack Obama bragged on camera. People can watch that lecture, or not lecture, that speech that he gave in, like, what was it, 2012 or something, when ISIS was just created, and he's talking about how the U.S. Special Forces are training ISIL. He's talking about that. And he says so. And then we look at what they've done, and they've certainly been just one of many weapons against nation states over the past years. So yeah, that clip says a lot. Oh, you're on mute.
Here is one to back that clip up. And after we play this clip, I'm going to go back to something you were talking about with the 7 nations being attacked. But the U.S. had eyes on attacking 7 nations. I want to go back second, but I want to finish this out with another clip that backs this clip up that we were just looking at, and it's about 53 seconds also.
We created ISIS. I mean, ISIS is no less than the people up in Islamberg, no less than Gulen, is a CIA creation. John McCain, for heaven's sake, was over there with the ISIS officials. We created them. They came from the Al-Nusayr group, the Syrian Liberation Front. These two organizations combined, and they morphed into ISIS. It's our creation. We create them. We still direct them. When ISIS warriors are injured in battle, where are they transported? They're transported, for heaven's sake, to Israel. They're treated by the Israelis in Israeli hospitals and brought back to battle.
Well, plenty of the rebels have acknowledged that they've been supported by Israel, and they've thanked Israel for helping them throughout. In fact, arms are oftentimes caught. Israeli arms are caught on en route to the rebel groups.
So we see that they were saying the creation of ISIS or ISIL was a construct of the U.S. Intelligence agencies. Now, along with that, I want to go back to what you were saying about the what Wesley Clark talked about with the 7 nations that were on the hit list for the United States, and then I want your after I play the clip, I want your opinion on how is the information that he talked about playing out today as we see the drive for war in the Middle East and North African region. So I'm going to play that. I have the audio, and I'm going to play the audio for you right here. I don't want to get a strike, so I don't know if they'll let me do this one, but here it is right here.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who used to work for me, and one of the generals called me and he said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, No. He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They've just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper. He said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense office today. And he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
Right. Your take on that, because if you look at the very nations that he mentioned, the United States either has bases there and claims to fight terrorism there, or she has already bombed them into the Stone Age. What is your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's like we were saying at the beginning when we were talking about Brian Burlatek's innovation of just reading documents that are put out publicly by the U.S. government or by these leading think tanks, and then just observing what they do and seeing that they say what they do as part of the entire building of a consensus. You got to get a lot of moving parts to be on the same rhythm. So, it takes some management to carry out something like a 9/11 or this sort of insane plunge into forever wars of regime change. You got to do a lot of work in this sort to make that kind of thing happen. So, you know, Wesley Clark is saying this, in 2004, 2005, and it's great that he said that as a former head of NATO. I believe that was his position, right? He's the former Secretary General.
Yes.
Yeah.
He is the general that wanted to bomb Russia.
He what?
He wanted to bomb Russia. Yes.
Really?
Yes. Wesley Clark. He, as a matter of fact, let me mute you for 1 second. Wesley Clark, when the Russians went, you know, when the United States bombed Yugoslavia and the Russians took that air base, you remember, in Kosovo, Wesley Clark gave the order to bomb the Russians at that air base. And a British general, Sir Michael Jackson, said, "You must be crazy as hell. That's World War III." And he refused to initiate that order for Wesley Clark.
Oh, wow. I did not know that.
Yes.
I would like to think Wesley Clark, I guess, got a little bit of his head out of his ass by the time he was given that presentation. Damn. Okay. Well, see, so so people could have, they were surprised that somebody from the inside like that came out and said what he said so clearly and concisely. But again, it shouldn't have been a surprise because the Project for a New American Centric crowd had already made it public exactly what they were going to do. And then they did another report, you know, just before 9/11, calling for a new Pearl Harbor incident to rally the sentiments of the American people towards a policy that they would not otherwise support in terms of wars in the Middle East. That there wasn't the support from the people for such a thing before 9/11, and so they called for it. They're carrying out tabletop war game exercises regarding what do you do when terrorists hijack a plane and fly into, let's say, a building like the Pentagon or the World Trade Center. And they carry out these exercises in like the summer of 2000, 2001. They're doing a lot of these things. And they're doing also exercises on like, what do you do if Saddam Hussein deploys weaponized smallpox, you know, to create a viral attack onto our Western freedom-loving states? What do you do? And so you have like that's Operation Dark Winter, also part of the same thing, which basically becomes a model that was used for many similar tabletop exercises, like the thing that had a chapter on Operation Lockstep, funded by the Rockefeller Foundation, and then Event 201. But that was another scenario. They were like, okay, do we do the planes or do we do the weaponized smallpox virus? Let's do the planes. They ended up going with the planes. But they made it, this is all public stuff, right? Anybody who had some eyeballs and a bit of curiosity could have read that and acted appropriately, but people didn't. They chose to instead get the spoon-fed version of what's going on in Washington by the Washington Post or the New York Times or whatever, however they choose to consume their information on and have it spoon-fed to them and regurgitated to them through these feeders. So yeah, like at the end of the day, Iran has been the big target. And I think, you know, Biden came back from Russia in 1998 when he was on the Senate. I don't know if it was Senate and Foreign Relations Committee. But he was like meeting with his counterparts around Yeltsin and Primakov, and he gave a press conference in 1998 when he returned, and what did he say? He said, you know, he's recounting a threat he was given by the Russians, saying, look, if America doesn't stop with this policy of like threatening to bomb Yugoslavia, which I guess then they ended up doing, and perestroika, then the Russians would start working more closely with the Chinese and the Iranians. And Biden is like coming back, chuckling, saying, yeah, I can't believe these idiots. This is actually, they threatened us. and my response to the Russians were, good luck to you. You go and do that. Why don't you bring in Iran more closely while you're at it? See how that goes. But in reality, so he's laughing like a jackass. That did not age well. But Zbigniew Brzezinski in that same year is also giving interviews saying that the only thing that could possibly threaten the emerging New World Order that he's been fighting his entire life to help build with Kissinger and the trilaterals that, you know, he was always a part of, and Al-Qaeda that he created. But he's bragging, or not bragging, but he gives in several interviews that the only possible thing that could threaten that end of history scenario that he's been working towards is some form of alliance of Russia, China, and Iran. And that would be the type of thing that's the only thing he could see that could create a power base sufficient to threaten the Anglo-American NATO establishment. And that could create a basis around which Eurasia as a whole could unify around a different kind of policy. And then that could bring in all sorts of nonlinear effects of other nations in Africa and the Middle East and others, the 80% of the world population that didn't benefit materially by globalization. They would all be inclined to want to work with this other thing. So anyway, this has been in the back of the minds of the top-down decision makers as a fear, a nightmare scenario of Iran being sort of the key player that would help to change the dynamics in Eurasia as a whole. And sure enough, we've seen that with the Russian-Iranian north-south transportation corridor with India that was created in 2001. We set with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization was brought online officially in I think also the year 2001, but it was being negotiated already in 1998. The BRICS also was being negotiated back then, but it only came online, whatever it was, 2007 or something. It was joined with South Africa in 2011. But all of these, there's a few of these the Eurasian Economic Union was brought online. So all of these regional entities were created basically in such a manner that Zbigniew and Biden's nightmares were brought to life. And this became an obsession to stop this at all costs. And so if they could destroy Iran, which is the most powerful, viable economy in the Middle East, then that would really take the wind out of the sails of progress towards some form of alternative peace dynamic. Iran has been painted by a lot of our propagandists as the cause of all global terrorism, ignoring everything you and I just said. And the fact is there's not been a single court anywhere in the world that actually found Iran provably guilty of any act of terrorism. That's not that one can make an argument maybe if you say, proxies in Hezbollah and proxies in Hamas, but even there, if you look at the real acts of terrorism, you got to look towards the Anglo-Israeli intelligence behind ISIS and Al-Qaeda and all of these subgroups. That's primarily it. But we are told, like a lot of Americans, I would say maybe even the majority, still believe that Iran is the cause of all terrorism. It's absurd, and you look at it inside of Iran itself. There's women in positions of political power. There is university education granted equally, men, women. They don't really enforce the hijab as much as we're told that it's like a total you have no freedoms because women have to wear a hijab, and it's it's encouraged, but there's tons of women not wearing hijabs as well. It's not all that serious it's not a crime. Though it's, you can say frowned upon by the religious authorities. It's whatever. It's not that big of a thing. It's not like they're walking around in head to ankle smocks, not showing a fraction of skin as we promoted when we were supporting the growth of Al Qaeda and then, Taliban earlier as a proxy when we were still using it to fight the Soviets. So Iran has, there's a lot of Jews that there's 12,000 Jews that live quite happily in Iran. There's some Christians, but it's overall a very ecumenical dynamic. And you had Iran, send envoys to the Vatican and to meet with Pope John Paul II in 1997, 98, around creating a dialogue of civilizations around cooperation instead of Hobbesianism. And the Chinese and the Russians have a lot to work with when they sign their large scale defense and economic treaties with Iran. China, $400+ billion over 25 years. Russia, something similar on a smaller magnitude, but still defense, energy, economic development with Iran for 20 years. So you have all of these different pacts that involve the reasons why Iran was brought into the SCO. That they were brought into the BRICS. So and also peace processes with the Saudis. That's also been going on faster and faster since MBS got into power. You have real bridge building that's been growing between the Saudis and the Iranians, overcoming a lot of the hostilities that have been cultivated by foreign powers against them. So you got all of these positive dynamics. If we really cared about peace and democracy and women's rights, we would stop bombing these countries to the Stone Age and start working with countries that are trying to get a positive dialogue around economic development and reconstruction. And I saw somebody in the chat box pointed out Helget Seplerush's peace program. That's for a new peace and security architecture. Yeah, that's a real new security architecture that Helget Seplerush promotes. Yeah, that's the right way of thinking. If we really cared about peace, we would get behind those types of initiatives and try to get into some cooperative working relationship between the U.S., European countries, and Russia, China, and Iran, instead of going along with this minority grouping of death cult psychopaths that are trying to, create some sort of a new crusade. But now with nuclear weapons, the crusade could kind of go on for centuries because there were no nuclear weapons. Whereas now all of a sudden you got these things littered through, Israel has 200 plus nuclear weapons as far as we know, maybe more. I mean, this is a much, much, much more dangerous game than it was a millennium ago.
Yeah. Before I know you have to go, so before I let you go, I think what took place in Pristina, the airport in Pristina in Kosovo, and when the NATO troops were about to go into Kosovo, Russia and the United States was mocking Russia because it was right after the fall. I mean, the Soviet Union or whatever, and Russia did not have the military strength, so they thought. And Russia surprised the entire West by sending paratroopers into Kosovo, and they occupied the base of Pristina. And General Wesley Clark, he was the NATO Supreme Allied Commander, and he gave the orders to bomb that base because Russia turned it into a base. And Sir Michael Jackson, you can look it up, the British general, the head of British forces, he refused the order by General Wesley Clark, and because he said that would mean World War III, and that is why NATO did not bomb the Russian forces that had taken the airport in Pristina. I believe it was Pristina. I'm pretty sure it was Pristina in Kosovo. I'm pretty sure it was. Matt, man, thank you so much for joining us again, man. I'm telling you, man, I cannot say enough, man. Thank you so much.
Oh, dude, it's always a pleasure. I love these little chats, and I woke up stressed because I closed my eyes a few hours before our interview because I did an all night writing, and then I didn't realize that by blinking a little bit too long I would pass out, and I woke up and it was like 12:50 Eastern time, and I was thinking, oh my God, I screwed over Rasheed. I felt terrible. So I was glad that I reread your message and it was Central Time. So all worked out. And yeah, anytime you want to keep chatting about any of these topics, let me know. I'm always a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you, my brother. And I'll see you later, and I'll send you a copy of the video.
All right, cool. Thanks.
Be blessed, man.
You too. Everybody,
thank you for joining us on this platform, and thank you for joining us for this episode. Let me say something. Please don't get off there yet. We've been trying to do channel member streams. We've been having problems, as you know, with a certain platform. So we're going to keep trying. We tried to do a YouTube stream for not YouTube, excuse me, a Patreon stream also, and StreamYard kept throwing us off the air. Rasheed and I, we had to record something yesterday, not like we wanted to do, and we'll post it to stream for Patreon and to channel members either today or tomorrow. And I just want to apologize. I'm doing everything I can to try to, and I'm not technically savvy. So that's one thing I want you to understand. I'm not in the age of technology. I'm trying to adjust. My children help me with this stuff, with technology. So I'm doing the best that I can with what I know. And I just want to take the time out to thank each and every one of you guys for having the patience with me, because I'm telling you, I'm learning as you are learning. And we're on this beautiful, magnificent journey called life. And life is better when we help each other, when we aid each other, and when we become more compassionate and understanding about things that are going on. Now, in closing, I'd like to say to each and every one of you, listen, from my heart, from the deepest of my heart and the deepest of my soul, I want to thank each and every one of you. If you just paid attention to the show 1 second, 1 minute, or 1 hour, it means the world, because you did not have to give that time to this platform, and you chose to. And from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank you. My mom wants to thank you. My wife wants to thank you. My children want to thank you. My brother, who's a vet, he wants to thank you. My other brother wants to thank you. My sisters want to thank you. And so I want to just take this time out to say, from my heart to your ears, I thank you. And I love each and every one of you, but know that the love that I have for you will always pale in comparison to the love that the divine supreme being has for you. Until we next speak again, stay strong, stay true, but above all things, stay righteous. And remember to do right by yourself and by everybody else, not because people are watching or because you may get a couple points on this. No, do right by yourself and others, because it is the right thing to do. And remember that if nobody else sees you, God is always watching, and that's the one you have to please. Hey, mama, I hope I represented you right. Your baby boy still loves you more than life. Deuces, everybody. Thank each and every one of you. We're out of here. Peace.